I was 12 the night a room full of strangers decided my worth, marble floors, shining like ice under the chandeliers, my mom in her cleaning polo wiping lipstick off glass, and me on the floor with long division, pretending the laughter wasn't about us, and then Colton Harrington, the app guy with the grin that never makes it to his eyes, pointed at me like I was a prop and said, "Since your mom works for me, let's talk reality. My choreographer's fusion routine cost 50 grand. Nobody touches it, dance it clean. And I'll donate 80 million to kids, like you, miss a beat, and you tell this room why people should stay in their lane phones." Snapped up, a few chuckles, rose like steam. My mom gave me the tiniest shake of the head. But I could feel something else, that hot hum you get when your dignity is on trial. And you either swallow it or you make a choice, and I stood slow on purpose, because slow is power, and I said 2 conditions. You don't write the check to me. You put it in a trust, so kids who can't afford lessons get them, and you don't move the goalposts. And he smiled like he was placing a bet he'd already rigged. "Yeah, kid. We love ambition. Sure, you know what I mean." I pulled off my sneakers, slid into my grandma's old shoes. The leather cracked and Honest smoothed my braids back with the elastic from my wrist, and the whole room got quiet without anyone touching a switch. The track hit with stern strings that want your spine tall, so I let my arms float like I was painting the ceiling with air, the way Grandma taught me in our tiny kitchen then. The beat dropped into contemporary, and I let my bones get soft, but not loose palms, to marble rolling and rising like the floor. And I were in on a secret, laughter, faded heads tilted, and when the drums snapped into hip-hop, I broke the movement into pieces, head-sharp shoulders, clean ribs telling their own story, while my legs kept the pulse phones lowered without people noticing, because they forgot they came for humiliation, and realized they were getting a lesson. Then came the bright Latin heat, and I let my hips find the kitchen kind of joy, the pot simmering, somebody humming. Rent due, but we dance anyway. And I wasn't chasing perfect, I was chasing true. Then the part everyone called professionally impossible. The fouettes. 32 like bargaining chips with God, counting like Grandma taught me under my breath, 1 on the lift, 2 on the spot, the music trying to throw me and me not letting it. And around 21 I added the isolation's torso, disagreeing with legs, face calm like a lake before a storm. I leapt twice, 3 times, felt the ceiling lean closer, landed in a split that slid clean to center, and rose to the final reach, and for a breath there was silence that felt like baptism, you know, that hush. Then the track hiccuped and died. Someone had pulled a cord. Voices protested. We all heard it finish, but Colton was already walking house rules. Incomplete accompaniment. Can't count it, yeah. That happened. And while people were still processing, an assistant hustled in and did the fakest accident on record, a pan of beet glaze flipping crimson onto the marble in a thick smear, unsafe now. So sorry, and the room's thought was louder than any microphone. So this is who he is. I didn't argue, arguing Pern's energy. I needed for movement. I crouched, touched the edge of the spill, sticky and slick. At the same time stood, nodded at the sound tech. To roll the last 30 seconds, he looked at Colton, then at me, pressed play, and I used their mess, the way you use weather heel, skimming the slick right foot, biting into the sticky, just enough to anchor the spin arms a fraction wider. To catch balance, the red streaked my leotard, not like damage, but like paint you wear into battle, and every slide said, "I can turn your stain into a step." When I finished, I didn't bow. I just looked at Colton and said, "You said 80 million for kids like me." The first clap came from a woman in pearls that whispered old rich, then more hands, then standing, because sometimes standing is easier than saying I was wrong. I slept that night on our pullout and dreamed I was glass that doesn't break, woke to the phone before the sun chose a mood. Brightworks said, my mom violated client policies, effective immediately. The principal called about anonymous tips and words like disruption. The landlord said, his cousin needed our apartment, 30 days. You start to recognize patterns when you don't have cushion think pieces calling me attention. Hungry paid experts explaining dance they've never sweated through deepfake rumors and concerned threads. My mom cooked rice with too much water and pretended the steam was to blame for her eyes, and I asked the question that lives in every kid's throat, did I do something wrong? And she smoothed my hair and said no. You did something right, that's why they're scrambling. Help knocked 3 days later, carrying coffee that didn't taste like pennies and files that felt like thunder. The woman in pearls, Beatrice Langford, had receipts, not revenge proof, that Colton didn't find random targets. He studied them and picked challenges that punished their shifts and childcare and bodies, then edited the failure into content. She had bank trails, NDAs, whispers turned paper, then doctors turned. Aaron Miles showed up with the gentle hands of a man who has put too many people back together. He recognized a janitor from one of the old videos as a laid-off colleague and started digging. Then Gabriella Cruz, a chef who lost her restaurant in the downturn, played us audio from a night Colton cut prep time and called it a fair test, and the dance world found us because truth travels like water. Naomi Alvarez, a principal dancer, posted from rehearsal. No makeup saying what she saw wasn't miracle but mastery, inherited technique, and hours on bad flooring. Hudson School of Dance sent a letter with a full scholarship. It didn't read like charity, it read like recognition, which hits deeper because it says we saw you before we needed you for a headline. We still had a firing and eviction notice and a meeting where the principal pronounced my name like he wasn't sure it belonged to a student. So Beatrice booked the Seaport Auditorium, neutral ground, with ugly carpet and perfect acoustics. And Judge Marilyn Cortez volunteered to moderate the panel, was Clara Whitford from Hudson, Naomi from the company, and a policy professor who studies how institutions rehearse fairness. While practicing control, it streamed live. I wore a black dress and my grandma's polished shoes, because shine, even a little, can argue for you. Colton arrived with suits and cameras, and a smile set to viral. His lawyers said the dare was metaphor, promises near bars don't count. Entertainment isn't enforceable. Beatrice slid a folder, then another, then hit play on the assistant's recordings. Colton's voice explaining where to stand to block my path, where to cut the music to seed. Doubt which headline to buy first. The room exhaled the way a room does when it recognizes the shape of a lie, and the judge asked clean questions you can't dance around. If it was a joke, why sabotage the conditions for success? If you never intended to pay, why say a number and a purpose? He tried to smile, and the smile quit, and he said the quiet part. She's from Lakeview Heights. Her mother cleans air vents. She doesn't have the background, and even he heard it late. I stood, because sitting makes some truths small. My mom doesn't just clean vents. She clears messes, so people like you don't have to look at yourselves, my grandma taught me. Talent is like water. It finds a crack and makes a way. You made a promise not to me, to the kids after me. The ruling came down like a gavel that had been waiting years. Pay the $80 million to an independent trust with audits. Stop targeting vulnerable people for content and... Yeah, the internet isn't a place you get to lie forever, just because the algorithm is thirsty. The next part wasn't a movie montage. It was receipts and bylaws, board minutes, and snacks. Advertisers leaving because they found their spine investigators opening drawers. Nobody had dusted. We signed papers in an office that smelled like toner and beginnings. And the first studio opened in a warehouse with stubborn windows, learning to love light. We named it the Evelyn Hart Center, after my grandma, because speaking her name out loud convinces the air to behave. We started with kids whose socks had holes, And kids whose hope did too. We put a kitchen in the back because you can't dance hungry. Gabriella ran it like church doctor. Miles built tutoring around rehearsals. My mom became director of community outreach and finally wore a dress you can sit in without apologizing. For wrinkles, the money went to bus passes and stipends and bars that don't splinter, not shiny plaques. And 2 summers later, I performed a piece called The Room We Build Under Real Lights, with my grandma's ring on a chain where I could touch it. Without breaking my line, the front row was full of our kids, some still counting out loud, some pretending not to cry, and I did the leap that felt like home, and landed in a world with a little more space for a girl like me. People ask me if the story is tidy. Now it isn't. Some folks say the dare was a joke and we're too sensitive. Some think the money should have gone to STEM, not dance, some ask. Why a kid like me needs a stage to prove she belongs. Some wonder why we forgive institutions that take years to notice what was growing under their windows, and Colton is out there doing podcasts about growth and learning with someone coaching his vowels. Maybe he changed, maybe he didn't. That's not my job. My job is what my mom says when she tapes scholarship envelopes. Let's measure a promise by the kids who get to keep theirs, and when I'm sweeping glitter after class because nobody is special. When glitter hits the floor, I think about the beet glaze drying on the marble and how my body found a way through it, and that feels like the whole instruction manual use what they spill to show how you move. If you were the parent and your kid was standing in that circle with phones up and rules bending, would you tell them to dance? Would you call it a joke? Do public promises count when money and microphones are watching? Or do we let people shift the goalposts whenever courage shows up from the wrong zip code? Tell me what you think, where you're listening from, what you've seen in your city. And if someone ever points at you with a laugh, ask them to set the music, then build your own floor.